I've been talking about evolution and some of the funny things and evidences of why and why not, and all sorts of stuff. Just an honest look at it and how bizarre it really is. Um, Creation, how it's so neat, it fits everything. It logically fits the evidence available. Okay, want to look at just another. Let's look at geology for a second, and of course millions of years is needed for evolution to even be a plausible theory. Without it, it fails miserably. When you look at the rock layer, strata layer in the textbook, it looks all very logical, all nice in order, but in reality that rock layer, strata level layers actually don't exist. Okay, so that's something that you need to know. In fact, some of the oldest layers are sometimes on top of the youngest layers. And so when you go digging and you find a human skeleton or bone underneath, like many layers down underneath dinosaur ones which are above it, you would question, aren't the oldest ones supposed to be underneath the youngest ones? But evolutionists have nice theories of geology to say, oh, it's turned upside down, all sorts of stuff. Okay, and so they try and come up with all these different reasons why they can be in the wrong order, and the oldest ones not necessarily being at the bottom, etc. But they have big problems when they start doing that because it's not always consistent. Plus, they find there's like hundreds of millions of years missing in between layers with no erosion or any actual explanation. They actually have special names for when they come across those actual circumstances, and what it really means is we don't know what the hell happened there, and that's really what their special names mean. Their layer theory does not stack up evidence-wise, like it does not fit in any order. Now, the circular reasoning about their actual layer and age of everything is a bit weird. If you're digging and you find bones from the dinosaurs, etc., and they say, oh, that's them dinosaurs are in the Jurassic period or something like that, they will say then that area you're digging in is this old. This is how old it is, maybe 60 million or whatever. That's how old that layer is. Now, if they're digging and they find something from the Crustacea period, they'll go, oh, this layer is this old. So every fossil they find, they age the rocks around them based on the fossils. Okay, that's actually kind of weird, because what happens if they aren't that old? You've never really proven how old that layer is by finding the fossil at all. There's no evidence for saying just because you find a fossil that's how old it is. That's a silly way of aging something. Okay, and so how it works the other way around to try and support the ages of the rocks is they'll use a dating method, radiometric dating, to age the rocks, and therefore when they age the rocks they'll say this is how old the rock is, and when we dig in that type of age rock we find this fossil which fits our theory. That doesn't actually work either. Okay, and that is very inconsistent as well. And again, it falls apart theory-wise. Okay, the evidence is not supported. So it's circular reasoning. You dig, you find the fossil. We say this a rock is this old. If you find a fossil like this fossil, then that rock now is that old, or vice versa. Okay, so it works round and round and round, roundabout. Let's go round and round and round. And I have, on a previous video, talked about how radiometric dating is got huge flaws, and in fact it actually supports a young Earth if you look at it from a flood perspective. If there was a Noah's flood, global flood, catastrophe that destroyed all life on Earth and created strata layers covering the ground, the Earth, burying the animals and creating fossils, if that's the case, which is where the evidence points to, it also means that the radiometric dating things will be thrown out in their calculations because of the water solubility factor. So radiometric substances bleed, they're water soluble, so global flood will create the ratio between the one element turning to the other element. If one of them is water soluble, there's going to be less of one of the elements, meaning the rocks are going to look older than they are if water is involved. Now let's think about it. A dating method that relies on water not being around is not the strongest factual evidence for old rocks, I believe. So yeah, that's the evidence for that's one of the main evidences for ages of rocks. And so I believe the whole theory is actually, it's incredibly embarrassing and flawed, isn't it? It's not rational. Okay, that's one. That itself should destroy our belief in evolution. That alone is enough evidence to say, far out, this theory of evolution is highly implausible if the ages of the fossils are not what people say they are. There is no real reason to believe that animals have evolved from one to another if they have no real, if they're not an order of evolution in any form in the rock layer, then why would you believe they did in the first place? If there's no transitional fossils, why would you believe in it in the first place? If there's no evidence that there is actually millions of years of to make these rock layers, why would you believe the evolution in the first place? See, so geology itself, by looking at the strata layers and how they're formed, etc., and are they old, etc., that should actually disprove evolution and make it a total farce. Now that's one area, just one area. When we look at evidences, I went into the ice, drilling, where they talked about the ice and how they found a plane when they were drilling, and they had said they had found 100 years of ice core samples proving the Bible isn't right. But then they found a plane, and then they realized their ice core samples weren't right. Their aging, their dating of them was all thrown out. Instead of it being thousands of years to find a World War II plane, obviously their ages of what they were using calculations were wrong. Okay, proving it wasn't actually that old. The ice core samples weren't actually hundreds of thousands of years old at all. Okay, so again, they helped prove actually what creationists believe, that it's not old. I love it when they say they find evidence for an old Earth, like the radiometric dating. In fact, it actually becomes evidence for a young Earth, and the ice core samples, it actually becomes evidence for a young Earth. I love it. Encourage evolutionists to keep finding their amazing proofs, because they keep backfiring on them. And that's because it's not true. Easy peasy, it's not true, and that's why it backfires on them. Another one they use, and it's quite used a lot in arguments, I've come across it heaps, is what about the light years? Light years, where the sun, the time it takes for the rays of the sun of these distant stars to come through space so we can see it, is millions of years for the light to have come across so we can see it with our eyes, because of the distances involved, and they're saying hundreds of millions of years must have taken place. In fact, they're probably saying billions of years in some cases. Okay, so that I guess you could say that is a problem, or not, or just another thing to try and understand. So starlight and time is the issue. Okay, and starlight and time, beautiful physicists and wonderful smarter men than me have worked out that starlight, uh, the distance from starlight isn't actually going to disprove the Bible or the age of anything at all. In fact, they're thinking it actually can help creationists a lot. There's one quite good book written by Russell Humphreys, I think it is, Dr. Russell Humphreys, on the physics of starlight and time, and he goes into different theories where Einstein used black hole theories. He uses the same physics using a theory called white hole theory, and he using white hole and just punching in certain things instead of bounded universe, which is what the Big Bang Theory was one of its things that were put into its formula calculation. They put in unbounded into the formula for the Big Bang by just changing that assumption, because it was an assumption, to a bounded universe instead of an unbounded. Russell Humphreys came up with a different theory to the Big Bang one using physics alone, which actually proves that the universe actually can actually be made in 6 days, the entire universe, and be exactly what we see now, fitting the Bible. And using exactly the same theory as what Einstein and the Big Bang Theory were using, but with different assumptions put into the formula of the equation. We have to assume when you're looking at things like the starlight or the speed of light, you've got to assume, you've got to make assumptions. You've got to make an assumption that the speed of light is a constant and has never changed. Now that's an assumption which, if that assumption isn't true, has great implications, because if the speed of light has decelerated over time, then that means that changes the whole theory of how long it took to get here, doesn't it? And so you've got to make assumptions as a scientist, and so you can't really be categorical and say this is how long and see this proves this when you are using assumptions. The assumption that the universe is unbounded, which means there is no end to it, just goes on and on and on, there's no edge or border or end to it, is an assumption that is made. And if you use the assumption that the universe has a boundary and end, there is actually end to it, that's an assumption. Physics deals with these assumptions, and you make them into formulas, and theories are generated. Russell Humphreys one uses different assumptions and comes to conclusions that with an event horizon from a white hole or a black hole. Let's deal with black holes because you're probably more familiar with the concept. You have the gravity is so strong within a black hole that time stands still. Now, we know, if you've studied it at all, you know that gravity affects time. They've put atomic clocks at different altitudes, and they realized that time is affected by gravity. Now that is something they know is true, and Einstein did come up with that as well. He said he believed that to be the case, and that's why if you go fast enough, gravity is going to increase. If you go fast enough, isn't it, until time stands still? That's what his theory was. Well, gravity does slow down time, and if we're in a massive field, high gravity field, and then there's a low gravity field, time is going to be a lot slower for those in the high gravity field instead of the outside non-gravity. In the case of a black hole, if you were in a black hole, I mean, you'd be utterly destroyed, but just so you can understand the theory. You're in a black hole, and the event horizon is what separates the gravity from the outside part, and it's sucking in like a huge vacuum cleaner, isn't it? Through the gravity, even light is being bent and pulled in because the gravity is so immense in a black hole. And the event horizon is the border from where it's all getting sucked in from. Now, within that event horizon, gravity and time is at near standstill because of the great gravitational force in a black hole. Whereas just outside of the event horizon, time is less gravity, so it's faster. So if you had clocks inside the gravity field and clocks are put on the outside of the gravity field, the person standing inside the gravitational black hole, inside the event horizon, would see the clock on the outside spinning millions of miles an hour, and everything would be looking like it's sped up outside. Whereas if you were on the outside looking in, it would look like the clock on the clock hasn't even moved at all. Okay, so because of that understanding about gravity affecting time, slowing down time, a white hole would work in reverse, whereas a black hole is like a thin person eating, and as he eats and eats and eats things around him, he gets fatter and fatter, and so gets bigger and bigger, and just keeps eating and eating, and it gets fatter and fatter. So it's like a thin man eating who gets fatter. That's a black hole. The event horizon gets bigger. Whereas a white hole is like a fat man vomiting and getting thinner. The event horizon already is large to begin with, because he's a fat man, and as he spews out the volume, the material, instead of sucking it in, it's spewing it out, the event horizon will shrink, and so the fat man is going to get thinner and thinner, and the event horizon is going to get thinner and thinner until the event horizon, the actual white hole disappears and the event horizon disappears. At that point, the time affected by gravity on the outside of the event horizon and on the inside will become constant, will remain the same. So using a white hole theory about the formation of the universe instead of a black hole theory or a Big Bang theory, you come to different conclusions. The actual white hole theory shows physics-wise that you can travel at faster than the speed of light, that the materials can be spewed out of the white hole at faster than the speed of light. And so if we had a white hole and the universe was generated from inside a white hole, and it was spewing out in all directions, the planets and the galaxies, spewing it out from there, and as the event horizon is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, gravity within the event horizon, of course, is slower, so time is slower, but on the outside it's really fast. So as these are spewing out, for every day within the event horizon could be a million years on the outside of the event horizon for these bodies going around. And as it gets smaller and smaller, by the time it gets to the end, 6 days could have occurred within the event horizon of the white hole, and billions of years could have occurred on the outside of the event horizon for the universe, the rest of the universe. Therefore, light has had its chance to have moved across the universe quite easily. Now that's just using physics. I mean, a lot of Christians have said, well, couldn't God, if he created everything, couldn't he have just made the light in transit? Yeah, well, he probably could have. Hey. And a lot of people would say, well, isn't that being a little deceptive? You know, isn't that being a bit deceiving? Because people would think it's old when it isn't old. That's deceptive and deceiving. Well, well, it's all how your perspective, isn't it? If he did do that, then yeah, I guess it could confuse evolutionists, but I don't think his job was to confuse evolutionists. Oh, Then again, maybe it was. He made the platypus, which would be pretty confusing for evolutionists. Um, but I think he could have done it in a number of ways. We're just looking at how it could have been done. Um, yeah, so theoretically, the whole distance and time thing isn't actually a problem, and does not prove one way or another. It does prove it's theoretically just the same physics used in long age of the universe. It can be used to prove a short age of the universe. Okay, so that's a good one. Light and transition. It is funny that maybe, see, when God created Adam and Eve and then made a garden and put them in the garden, did he make full-grown trees for them to live in with fruit on them and all that? It's highly probable, yes. That means, would that be deceiving Adam and Eve that these trees he's made them old? So if we cut them in half, would they have the rings? Would he have made the rings in them to show made false rings in them so they'd look older? See, all these little ideas. I would have seen if he made a garden and put Adam and Eve in it, that the garden would have been a fully functioning garden with fruit trees and all that, and so that would, I guess, appear to imply age. But I don't think God was trying to deceive Adam and Eve at all. So you could argue either way, but it really doesn't matter. Again, it's not real evidence to try and disprove the Bible. It doesn't really disprove the Bible at all. There is actually answers to that question.